I think we'll start immediately with the first session. Our session titles towards an inclusive Arab Information Society. I'm delighted to have a distinguished panel, and I would like to call them to join me in the panel. Professor William Dutton, Shabina Khatri, and Mina Nagy. And I will be presenting myself also on the panel. As you know, internet has expanded greatly in the Arab world. The number of internet users, as I checked today on the internet stats website, or I think more about 90 million users. We have a huge boom in the use of social media in the Arab world. So we have lots of issues we can discuss about how access and how freedom of expression and how inclusive is the internet in the Arab world. So to start with, I will give the question for the panelists, and each panelist will try to answer that question in their presentation. Our question is basically, what are the challenges and what are the opportunities for a broad internet infrastructure and vibrant free Arab information society, and how to ensure we have an open environment that could enable free access of information, and that environment to be exclusive and a multi-stakeholder. I would like first to call Professor William Dutton to the floor. Professor William is a well-known Internet Studies professor at Oxford Internet Institute. He has been the director of the institute since 2002 up to 2011. He's currently working on different research, like the potential of fifth state enabled by the internet, collaborative network organization, and the politics of next generation research. His service include chairing the advisory committee of England, UK Office of Communications, Ofcom, and he has participated on the National Health System Direct Innovation Committee. So Professor William, you have the floor.
See. Thank you, Chairman. It's a pleasure to be here. I have 10 minutes, so I'm going to rush through this. I must say that I agree with everything Dr. Hesse said. I think that was a wonderful introduction, and I think it hits so many of key points that I'll shorten my own talk. The chair has asked what I thought the key challenge might be for the future of the internet. And I think worldwide and in this region, there's probably no greater challenge than how we reconcile freedom of expression with a variety of sometimes countervailing values and interests, which are also legitimate. But how we reconcile that, or if failing to reconcile that, we could undermine the vitality of the internet regionally and worldwide. Clearly, the internet has become a wellspring. There's a wellspring of support for the internet here in the Mina region, including the right of access and freedom of connection. But there is a spectrum of opinion about freedom of expression, which I'll illuminate for you, and I think it's how we deal with that spectrum of opinion, reconciling that with countervailing interests, that is probably the principal challenge we'll face. My remarks are based upon the Global Values Project, which we're very pleased to have some support from ICT-Qatar and also the World Economic Forum and others. I'll whiz over I'm happy to answer questions about that if they come up, but we began this project in 2010 with support from the World Economic Forum and ComScore, where we did a survey globally of internet users about freedom of expression. And it led us to the concept of what we call the new internet world. And by that we meant to emphasize how the center of gravity of the internet has shifted away from Western Europe and North America to the Eastern Asia, the global South, and so forth, and that's where the center of gravity of the internet lies. And while some people may be worried about that because they think that the old internet world is the bastion of freedom of expression online and so forth, we actually found that in North America and Western Europe there's somewhat of a complacency about freedom of expression, and actually the values of free expression, privacy, trust, and other core values of the internet are alive and well in the new internet world, and find expression and very innovative use of the internet in the new internet world. So we've wanted to relook at this in 2012 and whether or not, and also expand to the Middle East and North Africa and ask if this region, how it fits into the new internet world, and if there are patterns of attitudes and beliefs in the MENA region that could constrain the role of the internet in its future. Our methods were, we were based on survey, and I should emphasize primarily that this is a online internet survey, so all the opinions you hear are people who are online. We're not surveying people who are not yet using the internet. But yet we were able to expand this from 2010, and with support from ICT Qatar and others, we were able to include a sizable proportion of respondents from the MENA region. So we have about 2,800 respondents that are online from the Middle East and North Africa, and a worldwide survey population of over 11,000 respondents. We stratify the sample by such issues as age and gender and so forth, so that they reflect generally the online populations as best we can. When we talk about the different regions, if I show you data on the MENA region, all of the countries on the left are included. If I talk about the GCC countries, just the countries under that column are listed, in North Africa likewise. So I can come back to this, and I'll post the charts so that you can look at this later. First of all, I'd like to give you a sense of two issues that are clearly important for the Middle East and North Africa. One is the penetration rate. There are about 37% of people in the region are online, and that means that the digital divide in this region is about close to the world average. It could be much higher, and so that blue line you see is the proportion of the region that is online. So you could say that's an area where progress is important in the region. But probably the most visible and obvious aspect of this is what I would call the throw weight of the region, where it's relatively small in relation to other regions. You see the major throw weight on the new internet world is in Asia. There are already more Chinese online than there are Americans on the planet, and therefore it's absolutely Asia and other countries are becoming the dominant cultural influence on the internet, and the throw weight of the North America and Western Europe is declining. But still, the Middle East will be a small population on the internet, and it'll be surrounded by a multicultural world that dominates the content of the internet. And that's probably one of the most critical contextual factors that always will face the Middle Eastern region. In patterns of use, we found that the people in the MENA region are quite innovative. So in this respect, they fit in very well with the new internet world. In fact, users of the internet in the MENA region, we found they value the internet more as a source of information and a source of entertainment than do people in the old internet world. They're actually relying more heavily on the internet than people in many other parts of the world. And they're more involved in content production and social aspects of the internet. So posting material, socializing with people online. So the internet has become an innovative venue for content creation, for socialization, for getting information, for entertaining oneself, even relative, in fact, quite relative to the other media. However, it's interesting that in terms of business and e-commerce, the region is not as average or less than average in terms of its propensity to use the internet in business and commerce. It's clearly valued, so that you'll see from this chart that most people believe the internet is making life better for people like me. There's a small proportion of people who disagree with that, and they tend to be people who have less experience online, have been online less time, spend less time online, have lower levels of education, and view that their skills on the internet are poor. But most people believe that the internet has made their life better. And I just want to focus on one area that illustrates a very central theme of my talk. First of all, we ask people how free are the media and worldwide. And you can see that in the MENA region, the media are not as perceived as free as the media in other parts of the world. But in every part of the world and the MENA region, the internet is perceived as being a freer media for communication than other media, such as television and broadcasting. So that the internet is perceived as being a relatively open media. There are differences also, however, within the MENA region. For example, the GCC countries in blue, the internet is not perceived to be as free and open as it is in North Africa. This chart shows that basically the blue is the GCC countries, the light green is North Africa region. You can see that the right-hand column is the internet. You can see that the internet is perceived as being relatively more open and free in the North African region. But in both cases, the internet is perceived as more open than television from radio and newspapers in the region. This shows access to the internet should be a fundamental right for all people, and you can see that this is clearly a dominant pattern. The far right of the chart, basically most people, it's unfortunate that the resolution of these is not working, but about 50% of people that answered this question are totally in agreement that the internet should be a fundamental right of all people. So in terms of access to the internet, there's complete support among our survey population. In terms of actually freedom of expression, there's a perception that people believe that there's a great deal of freedom of expression in the region, in the GCC countries and North Africa. However, there are quite a number of limitations. That is, there's support for censoring the internet and limiting internet freedom with respect to a number of issues, such as protecting children, in case of extreme, when you ask if people could express their views, even if they're extreme, there's much more division among people in the region and worldwide, of course. There's concern over pornography, and there's a concern, there's a degree to which people feel that they are self-censoring themselves. That is, most people do not feel that they should say or will say anything they want to say online. There's a degree to which people will censor themselves. So, support for freedom of expression is high, but it has limitations, and it's countered by a number of prevailing concerns in the Middle East and worldwide over protecting privacy and freedom of expression, trusting what we see, not harming other people in terms of protecting children, and this creates a division, and you see a spectrum of opinion. Here's, for example, this is asking people if you should be able to be anonymous online, what you see here, even if you can't read the numbers, is two polar positions. On the right-hand side of the, very much support for there should be an ability for people to be anonymous online. In some countries, this is perceived as quintessential for having freedom of expression, that you can be anonymous in order not to suffer retribution if you say something that's unpopular. On the left, you see that there's a strong minority of people who believe that there should be no right to anonymity online. And so on a number of opinions with respect to freedom of expression, you saw these polls with a strong minority of people who disagree with the dominant position that is in support of freedom of expression. And I think that this is critical to deal with that kind of spectrum of opinion and reconcile these views. Who are the people, generally the people who are in the minority who actually are more resistant to freedom of expression and more skeptical about freedom of expression, tend to be older, tend to have less time and experience online. And these are internet users. These are not people offline. So I imagine offline there's even more skepticism about freedom of expression. And they also have lower levels of education and perceive themselves to have poor internet abilities. So if you put that together, I think that there's a suggestion that there could be real initiatives in the region to educate people generally, but also in media literacy about the internet and what can be done online, to give people more experience, not just with the internet, but also social media, so that it's not a mystery to them and it's not something to fear. They see it in concrete terms. And that you create a dialogue between people who disagree with one another over issues of freedom of expression and how to balance that with privacy and trust and other values. And then I would finally say that there's clear evidence, and I would want to come back to what Dr. Hesse said about decentralizing control. I think inevitably, if looking at the data from the region and also the position of the region in the global internet world, we have to envision a future in which there's a great deal more decentralization of control over content. In the ideal world, this would move to the household or to the individual, where households can control content and secure their future, rather than national content regulation, which becomes too blunt of an instrument and puts the internet service providers in a position of broadcasters and could be absolutely detrimental to the vitality of the internet. So reconciling these differences and then thinking through a long-term program to decentralize control over content, which is a legitimate aspect of internet regulation, but to move away from even multi-stakeholderism, if it's national or global, is not going to work in relation to accommodating the mix of values and interests there are online. I'll leave it there, and I apologize for the unreadable slides. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Professor William. I would like now to introduce Shabina Khatri. Shabina, she's a journalist based in Doha. Since 2009, she launched a Twitter feed. I'm sure most of you follow that Twitter feed, which is Doha News. She's tweeting about updates and news from Doha. It's also good to hear from Shabina about the information flow and how your experience here in Doha.
Thank you. I'm going to push this down a little bit. Can everyone hear me? Okay. I guess I'll stand on my tiptoes here. Thank you, ictQatar, for inviting me to speak today. All the esteemed speakers have already hit on a lot of the important topics in terms of what an open information society is and why we need one. And I'm going to be here talking from the perspective of a journalist about how the local media facilitates an open information society. So basically, as journalists, what we do to help this society be established and continue to grow. as journalists by profession, what we do is we gather information and we vet this information, we verify it, and we contextualize it, and we package it into news that's considered pertinent and relevant to people in society. And in theory, this information is supposed to help people make more informed choices. But in practice, in Qatar, it's actually very difficult to participate in the news gathering process. And there are a lot of obstacles to that. And the first obstacle we have is that not everyone in Qatar is convinced that we need this open Arab information society. I taught at Northwestern upstairs for 3 years, and some of the first journalism students that I had here were asking us, why is it that we have to air dirty laundry, quote unquote? Why do we have to discuss things in society that should be better suited to be discussed at home behind closed doors? And then 6 months ago, a tragedy happened that really proved to people why we need an open information society here and why we need a strong local media to facilitate the flow of information, especially in an emergency. And this, I'm referring to the Villagio fire, which killed 19 people. And it was a very tragic day, and it was a very confusing and scary day for a lot of people because they didn't know what was happening during that day. So the fire is kind of a good and a bad example of all the obstacles Qatar faces as it moves towards this open information society. So I'm going to talk a little bit about these obstacles. And the first couple are just practical considerations. The lack of local journalists. Qatar has this weird demographic profile where 15% of the population is locals. And these locals are basically the policymakers here. So it's good for the increasing of the number of local journalists in order to increase buy-in into this idea of an open Arab information society. You know, and then we also have this problem of expats feeling intimidated, being concerned about losing jobs or being deported if they report on news. And if we had more Qatari journalists, some of those concerns would be alleviated because Qatari journalists wouldn't be feeling like they would lose their work visas if they pursued stories that would rub people the wrong way. And then we also have another practical consideration of the language barrier. Qatar conducts most of its business in Arabic. So, for example, at the Villagio fire press conference, the entire press conference was conducted in Arabic. So the English media, for example, had to either scramble to get someone next to them to translate, or had to use their Arabic skills, or had to wait till the end of the press conference to be able to find out what happened. And it is the local media's job, in a sense, to help bridge this gap between the English-speaking population and the Arabic operations of the government. But also the government should work to help many of the people here don't speak Arabic. Many of the people who died in the fire don't speak Arabic. It would help for the government to provide some sort of English translation for them. And then the other two obstacles are more of a social and cultural relation. In terms of when the fire happened, I spoke to a senior Al Jazeera editor, and he told me that the instinct here, the instinct in Arab society, is that when a tragedy strikes or when something like this happens, the instinct is to hold the information close to the chest. So the fire started at 11 o'clock in the morning. We didn't really hear any official lines about what happened until 8 o'clock at night. And that's because people were holding the information because that was what they're used to doing. And this was a problem because in the absence of official information, there was a vacuum, and it was filled with a lot of rumors and hearsay and panic. And it's also a problem in terms of it's really hard to get official sources to talk in Qatar. It's very hard to attach information to a name. And that's because people are afraid if they put their names to information, then they'll either be held accountable for that information or they will be held accountable for the implications of that information. And this is a problem. Even talking to spokespeople of companies, they say, just say spokesman, don't say my name. And I say, that's your job to be the spokesman. Why can't you put your name to that? So these are some of the problems that Qatar is having. But I do think that change is happening. And we have Northwestern University upstairs creating this crop of journalists. We have the internet and the democratization of information as more people get comfortable sharing things online. We have the Doha Center for Media Freedom conducting media literacy programs and studies on how to improve the local media here. And then Qatar itself is increasing its profile, you know, through COP18 this week, through 2022 pretty soon in a decade, through the Doha Film Festival. The global media is here. The global media is looking at Qatar. The global media is reporting on Qatar. And this is really helping, I think, the people here develop a thick skin about what's being said here. And I think that is trickling down to the local media. And I do want to say that this open information society, when it comes here, when it is established, it's not going to look necessarily like it looks in other countries, like it does in Asia or the US. And I think that's good. I think that Qatar needs to establish its own set of rules for this information society, what it's comfortable with, what meshes well with the identity and culture, as Dr. Hessa pointed out. And I think that's the only way it would stick. If it was just transplanted wholesale, then it would be imposed and it wouldn't be adapted or accepted. So I look forward to being part of the change that's coming here, and I think the media scene is going to look very different in the next decade. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shabina, for sharing a very interesting experience. Next, we have an interesting speaker, Mina Nagy. He's a co-founder of Taghreedat. Some of you who are active in Twitter, they might know that Taridat is an initiative for Arabic content development. It has more than 100,000 followers. Taridat has been working actively with Twitter, Wikimedia Foundation, and other partners to encourage Arabic content development online. So, Mina, please share your experience with us.
Thank you, Mohamed, and I'm very happy to be here with you all today. And I'm mainly here to tell you good news, because we always keep complaining about that Arabic digital content is so lagging behind. It's only 3%. We always keep saying that every now and then, that we don't have enough content. We don't have enough content. So, but what do we do? But what do we do in order to actually stop complaining about the gap we have and actually do something about it? So the good news I have today is an initiative that I'm very personally proud of, and it actually has changed my life even. And this initiative is not just 2 people working to create change, but it's 7,000 people in 31 world countries. Taghreedat is the Arab world's largest crowdsourcing initiative in the Arab world, and it has been the first initiative to actually apply the concept of crowdsourcing in the Arab world successfully to create or to drive a certain cause. So basically what these people are doing, they are doing great work every single day, although they're all doing it part-time. Some of them are translating Wikipedia articles. Others are subtitling videos. Others are translating and localizing content. So they're doing lots of great things in order to stop waiting for and stop complaining about Arabic digital content and stop waiting for organizations to actually do something about it, but actually decide to be proactive and start with their own self. So of course we know the problem, but let me summarize it first before we explain how we actually came up with a practical solution to this. So this infographic, it summarizes kind of the important content gap that we have in the Arab world. Only 3%, as per ITU estimates, is only the Arabic content online. And that's quite, let me say, a disgraceful figure, because we have over 90 million Arab users, and only 3% of the content is online. So it's very clear that we're not doing enough to actually change that. So despite the 90 million people online, only 3% of content is in Arabic, and this huge gap between demand and supply, the huge gap between what we can do and what we are actually doing, this is exactly what we've decided to do something about it. So interestingly enough, Arabic language now is one of the top 10 consumed language on the internet, and that's because of the number of users who have internet access in different Arab countries. However, again, we believe that there are many reasons why Arabic is actually not picking up the way it should be, considering that there are many educated Arab users who could actually try to enrich Arabic content. And this picture For English speakers, they won't be able to read what's on, but it basically says that don't kill your Arabic language. And killing Arabic language is not just by speaking Arabic, it's also by the online part, because years ahead, our children would need to know what our heritage is, and what are we doing, and what accomplishments have we achieved in these years. And if we only keep doing it offline and we don't have online records to explain what we're doing and what's our history and what's our future, and all of our content should be only offline in dictionaries and academic papers, then we won't be really progressing when it comes to online content, and we'll keep complaining and that's it. We won't do anything about it. So what we've come up as a great solution to this is to stop waiting. And I know that there are many people driving Arabic digital content, and Taghreedat is certainly not just the only one doing that. But then it's not just about press releases, it's not just about flashy messages, it's about actually doing something. And that's why we believe that crowdsourcing is the best way. Crowdsourcing, of course, it's a concept that has been implemented in the Western world, and crowdsourcing simply means that you have volunteers working virtually in online communities. They don't meet, they don't know each other, but they mostly work online for a certain cause. So we have, for instance, developer communities who code stuff, and when we try to apply crowdsourcing, we wanted to have translators and linguists and volunteer Arabic writers to actually enrich the web in different countries, regardless the boundaries, regardless all the financial and social boundaries that they all have. So we believe that volunteering should be the way forward, and not just waiting for someone else to do it for us. So when we applied crowdsourcing, we first, of course, we started in 2 or 3 countries only, and we started in the Gulf, and then it's been picking up really, really great, and it's been surprising even for the initiative co-founders. And now we are in 31 countries, including those who are in the US, in Canada, in Australia. And you always ask the question of, okay, so all these people have jobs, all these people have their busy lives, many of them are married and they have their kids, so why are these people, rather than choosing to go to a cool movie, or rather than hanging out with friends after work hours, why are they actually spending hours to translate, to write Wikipedia articles, to subtitle educational videos, to actually work for the Arabic web? So I think the answer is passion. And are you just saying something, or are you going to achieve it as well? So our first project was with Twitter, and we worked with Twitter for the first project, and we brought the Arabic Twitter interface for the first time, and that was in October 2011. And then since then, we have partnered with these 7 organizations on different projects, and these projects are really quite different. So they're not just localization. So we have a licensing agreement with the Wikimedia Foundation for the first time, for the second time in Qatar after Qatar Foundation. And this project was to increase the number of active Arabic editors on Wikipedia. Wikipedia is the 27th top language on Wikipedia. Sorry, Arabic is the 27th top language, and this is really also a very bad figure. And thanks to our work, in 4 months, we brought this 4 ranks higher, and now Arabic is the 23rd language on Wikipedia. And in addition to Wikipedia, which is a huge, of course, content source, we worked with Khan Academy, and this is our latest project. And this has been really, really inspiring. We translated and subtitled 300 educational videos in 20 days. And this project is really very important to bring education to all Arab students who don't have either internet access or who can't go to schools for political reasons. And really, this project is a huge thing, and we're working still on that. We also partnered with TED, and of course TED is the hugest digital content player out there, and we localized the TED website, and it's going to be soon localized and brought into Arabic. And our latest project, which I'm going to elaborate on today, is with Google. And Google is recently trying to, in addition to, of course, its great Google tools, Google is trying to motivate Arabic users to produce more, and to stop just being consumers of content, but actually to start to produce it. So we're very proud with our partnership with Google on a great project that I'll tell you about. But let me first show you an infographic that really summarizes what impact Taghreedat has achieved. We always hear the question of, okay, so it's great you're saying, let's increase Arabic content, let's do something about it, but what is your impact? Have you achieved something tangible that you can talk about, or is it just press releases and flashy stuff? So thanks to Taghreedat, we have achieved 4 key things, and 5 key things, and we're still continuing to do more. First of all, we brought Arabic Twitter to life, and that's thanks to 5,000 volunteers at Twitter Translation Center and the Taghreedat volunteers. And this means that Twitter will be adopted more and more by Arabs who do not know well English, or who used to have language barriers as a huge barrier for them to access Twitter and to microblog on the social networking platform in Arabic. The other thing is that, as I mentioned, we've upped Arabic language 4 places on Wikipedia, and that was something we're really proud of, and we continue to do more on that. As I mentioned, TED, of course, we're bringing the TED website into Arabic for the first time, and with Khan Academy, this is our hugest impact. We're bringing education online for Arab students who don't have access to either offline schools or offline educational material. And also we've brought Storify, which is the world's first online curation platform. We also brought that into Arabic, the interface into Arabic. So let me show you a small stat chart, and this is the number of videos that are being translated on Khan Academy in different languages. And before we started, we launched this project on November 6th, 2012, and before that Arabic was the 7th top language on Khan, and now it's the 4th. And we have translated over 300 videos in 20 days, and that was for us was fascinating. So the project I'm going to tell you about, it's Arabic Web Days, and this is a project that Taghreedat is partnering with Google and Qatar Foundation and the Egyptian government. The project I'm telling you about is the Arabic Web Days project, and this is a project with Qatar Foundation. This is a project with Qatar Foundation, Egyptian government, of course Taghreedat. We have WAMDA, and we have in 6 countries we have this project. And this is a project essentially to make sure that Arabs do not just consume content, but actually produce something. So this project has a competition, offline events, online events as well, and it means to serve as a way to motivate people to actually start engaging in the conversation and doing whatever they can to enrich content. So this project was launched last week, and it's Qatar is also one of the countries that the project is included in. And all these partners are working together either through online events or offline events. So we have a website also that people can enter content through. And we believe that this project is very key to making Arabic content not just the problem of Arabs, but also to have a global movement to make sure that this is being picked up and this is being cared about by everyone, not just some countries, and while others are being left out. This project can have any organization or any user be part of. We have 15 global organizations right now, including Twitter and, of course, as I mentioned, Yamli, VineLab, Qatar Foundation, and many others. And we believe that this should be for everyone. I want to play a video, a 2-minute video, to actually explain what the whole problem of Arabic content is about and why should we all be part of this. So let me show you the video.
تفاعل الإنسان العربي منذ العصور القديمة مع ما كان متاحا من وسائط يتلقى من خلالها العلوم والترفيه والأخبار، بدءا بالمخطوطات القديمة والشعر، مرورا بالكتب والترجمات، ووصولا إلى الإذاعات العربية والمسرح. وكلما تعددت الوسائط لنقل المحتوى العربي، كلما زاد تفاعل الناس معها واتسع. فبعد دخول السينما والتلفاز تعاظمت قدرة المنتج العربي، وأصبح أقدر على الوصول إلى المجتمع العربي، فتمكن من نشر منتجه على الوسائط الحديثة، سواء ما كان إخباريا أو ثقافيا وتعليميا أو حتى ترفيهيا. واليوم نعايش زمنا تطورت فيه وسائل الاتصال، وتغلغل الإنترنت إلى شتى مناحي الحياة وفي جميع المجتمعات العربية، وتمكن الإنسان العربي من متابعة هذا التطور بسهولة، لكن واجهته مشكلة، فلم يجد على الشبكة ما يكفي من محتوى عربي نسبة إلى قدرته الكبيرة على التفاعل، لكنه ما لبث أن وجد الحلول المناسبة لهذه المشكلة، فانتشرت مقاطع الفيديو والقنوات التي تحمل عناوين ومحتويات عربية، وانتشرت كذلك المنتديات والمواقع الإخبارية والرياضية، وحتى بوابات التعلم الإلكتروني وما تحتويه من عدد كبير من محتوى التعليم. ولكن لا تزال نسبة المحتوى العربي متدنية، وتحتاج إلى جهد أكبر لتتناسب مع نسبة التواجد العربي على الشبكة. والآن تبدو الفرصة لإنتاج محتوى عربي متاحة بشكل أسهل وأسرع مع انتشار شبكات التواصل الاجتماعي وسرعات الإنترنت العالية. فإذا كنت تمتلك موهبة أو تبدع في مجال معين، فلماذا لا تنتقل للخطوة التالية من النجاح وتتواصل بشكل أوسع مع مجتمعك العربي؟ أيام الإنترنت العربي.
This is it. I wanted to tell you about the initiative, and I'm also pleased to announce that we are doing the first official Google, YouTube, and Twitter event in Qatar, and that's going to be on December 15th. So I urge you all to be part of this to learn more about the global movement of Arabic digital content and what other regional players are doing as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. For the sake of time, I think we have just 15 minutes. We need to get, we have a Q&A, and basically we have, sorry, it's working, yeah. So for the sake of time, we'll open a Q&A session first with the students from the university, and I would like to invite Professor John Laprise from Northwestern University with his class and students to ask questions. Then we will open it for the floor for questions. Professor John.
Hi, I'm John Laprise. I'm a professor at Northwestern University, and welcome to INET. I have some of my students back here, and I saw one hand. Sorry, they're like normal students. They all sit in the back.
Hi, my name is Oais. I'm from Northwestern. My question is to Professor William. You talked about the freedom of speech in the MENA region. I want to know if you found anything regarding the views of the people here regarding the copyright laws and piracy. Do they consider it, I mean, is it part of their freedom of expression? What is their opinion on this?
Okay. I'll answer briefly now, and then maybe others wish to. Yes, I mean, we have a whole battery of questions with respect to people's attitudes towards privacy and data protection. I think worldwide and in this region, one of the primary issues right now is a sort of a panic, often fueled by journalistic coverage of whether or not social networking and other applications online are undermining the privacy of personal data. For example, whether people are putting too much personal data online, whether they regret the information they put online. I think most people that have a great deal of experience in social networking are less concerned over this than people who do not have experience online. But this is one of a very clear example of where there seems to be a developing controversy over whether there should be much more restriction of freedom of expression in favor of protecting privacy of personal data. But I think it's a huge issue. I think it is an issue here, but it is an issue worldwide, and it could undermine freedom of expression if we don't take a very realistic view of that. For example, people want to put personal data online in many cases because that's how people find you, and you want to be found in social networks. You want services that are location-based, so you want people to have your location. So much of the furor over privacy and data protection is whether governments have access to the information people put on social networks, not on, and I think that's where the primary focus of concern should be, whether, to what degree governments can get access to information from internet service providers, and that should be considered personal and private and not accessible to third parties.
My name is Dana, and I wanted to ask, what does the government have to gain from decentralizing content?
Yeah, I think that's just a general question of
So then we assign them to original content creation projects, and that is such as the Wikipedia project, for instance, because they can create Wikipedia articles in Arabic. But then if they are great in translation, we of course let them subtitle videos, educational videos, or they can translate website interfaces, or depending on the project. So that's how we do it.
I think last question from the students, and then we can.
My question is to Shabina, Khatri. You talked about how societally they need to change in order to have more free content and flow of information. What efforts should the government make towards the society? Because it's always a fear of the government or a fear of the controller.
Well, I think that part of the fear is unfounded in terms of when we've at Doha News have approached government officials, we've never been told that we can't publish something, but the government could help in terms of becoming more accessible, in terms of, for example, one of our reporters has been trying to report on the new nursery rules in terms of whether children can be housed on an upper floor or lower floor. And she's gone to the Social Affairs Ministry 2 or 3 times now, and every time they tell her, okay, well, we have to get permission from somebody higher up, so come back tomorrow. And it's like an hour drive for her, so it's very difficult. So if those kinds of bureaucracies could be reduced, if officials could speak on the record and give information that people want so that people have an understanding of how things work, I think that would help a lot.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Laprise, and your students. I think we can open it now for the floor for discussion and Q&A as well.
Hello everybody, my name is Seymour from Qatar National Library. My first question is to Professor William Dutton. As we know, in North America and some part of Europe, to engage to close the digital divide is public libraries, to give access to internet. What are the best best practices or experience that we can push in this region to close the digital gap, digital divide?
That's, the question is how do we address the digital divide? And I think every country is facing this to more or less. Even UK, we have a quarter of the population still not online. I think to simplify, there are 2 basic ways of thinking about it. One is providing infrastructure. So, for example, in some rural areas, with lack of access to infrastructure, that can be a meaningful initiative. But in many cases, it's changing attitudes and values and beliefs. Many people are not online because they choose not to be online. So I think there's got to be a great deal of effort in terms of, I wouldn't call it marketing, but education about the internet, because a lot of the people who doubt the value of the internet tend to be people who have never used the internet. And therefore, it's a big challenge. Until people experience the internet, they don't get it, and they don't necessarily see the value of using it. But if they don't see the value of using it, it's very hard to get them to experience the internet. So I think you need to educate people, maybe have volunteers that are willing to talk to their grandparent or their parent or brother or sister to say, you need to be online, let me show you what you can do online. Also, it seems like in the Middle East and North Africa, there could be many more initiatives at work, in the workplace, to push the greater centrality of computing and telecommunications and the internet in effectively, efficiently working in the information economy. And therefore, that would promote greater literacy across the board as well, and greater access.
Thank you. My second question is to Shabina, and the question is, how do you make sure that you do not censor any information, and at the same time you do not touch any cultural and traditional sensitivity in the region when you publish something? Thank you.
So your question is, how do you balance the cultural sensitivities with censorship concerns? Okay, so what we do at Doha News is that we only publish things that we verify, and I think that goes a long way in preventing censorship and also addressing cultural concerns. So we won't publish anything that's rumor or hearsay. We always have sources, and we cite those sources. So usually when there's a controversy, if there are sources behind it, then people can't say, oh, you're lying, you're just saying this to hurt Qatar or something like this. And the controversy stops before it even starts. In terms of cultural sensitivities, we are sensitive to how things work here. And for example, for stories that have a criminal element to them, we will cover them in a way that's respectful of both the community and the victims. So I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah, okay. Is there a follow-up to that?
Yeah, I think someone in the back needs a mic.
Nabil Bukhalid, Isaac, Lebanon. My question is to Bill. I mean, when you're measuring freedom of expression, when something like freedom of expression, you do it in phases, like a kid that is developing and you give him a little more freedom in each and every phase. Between countries, how did you baseline the difference on the baseline of the freedom of expression in that country and the delta, the change that happened during the years that you were covering? Did you cover such a variation in freedom of expression opening or gains?
It's just hard to hear you.
Yeah.
How do I?
Is it better like that? Okay. I'm saying that freedom of expression is something very similar to offering freedom to kids, where it is phased. And there is a baseline that you're starting from, and there is a delta, there is a variation to where you are within 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. So between the countries that you covered within your studies, did you start with a baseline saying they were at that level during that year and now they are at that level?
I didn't report longitudinal data on this, but that's a very good question. So what do we norm these questions on? If somebody, a certain percentage of people feel that people should have access to the internet, is that high or low? Is that high or low relative over time? My sense is that we have asked these. We asked in 2010, and every time we can, we use questions that have been used in other surveys. So we try to compare across surveys. But clearly, for example, in the UK, we've done surveys every 2 years from 2003 on, asking many of the same questions. And it's very clear that over time, that we see huge differences in the way the internet is being perceived. First of all, it's becoming more central, and also freedom of expression. And as people get more experience with the internet, they also are more supportive of the internet as a right of access to the internet and freedom of expression. But I think we need to look at the data more carefully. But I think that there's beginning to be confusion and more differences of opinion on freedom of expression now, because it's becoming more complicated by issues being raised over such issues as protecting children, protecting moral values, national security, trust in fraudulent romance scams to fraudulent spam campaigns. So some people are, more and more people are doubting whether they want to support the freedom of expression that we had. And I think part of it is also related to the fact that, you know, when the internet was just an interesting innovation, people were allowed, people didn't care. And let academics and others experiment with this, it'll go away. It's not going to bother broadcasting and so forth. Today, the internet is becoming more important than broadcasting for access to information in many countries. It's broadcasters like local television and radio have to respond to the internet because the internet will report stories that are not reported on the by the broadcasters, and therefore the broadcasters have to change their practices in order to compete with the internet and to be part of the media ecology. So now people are looking far more closely, and you have the whole population looking at the internet, many of which who have no experience online. So addressing the digital divide is very much a part of trying to reinforce support for freedom of expression. If you have 70% of people in the region who have no experience online, it will be very hard to nurture support for freedom of expression online. And that will be okay.
I think we'll take the last question, sir.
Professor William, the question is addressed for you. You're witnessing the change, the disruptive change the Arab youth and young has done by the usage of the internet to turn down political systems and political leadership. So across the Arab world, we've been seeing people passionate, innovative to use the internet, to best use the internet to achieve social, political change and reform. Now, how do you look to this practice from benchmarking point of view worldwide? I mean, yes, we have 3% of the internet content is Arabic. We have few people using the internet. But what they have done and achieved during the course of the 18 months has been tremendous. Now, changing political leadership is something that is at the up goal of anybody or any organization. So how do you look to this practice? How such practice can be applied to social reform, cultural reform? How the internet can be best utilized to do that, and what is needed across government, NGOs, educational efforts to support that? How do you benchmark this practice, and how this practice can be a trend to move forward? Thank you.
I think I will take this opportunity also to ask panelists to give their closing remarks and try to answer the question as well. So we'll start with Mina to the Professor William.
I really think that the main message I want to say is that we should really move from waiting to actually doing something, and I think the power is really in the hands of, or let's say in the clicks of consumers, because, or online users, because it's the time when everyone can really make a difference, and no matter what the boundaries, whether they are regulatory boundaries or any other types of boundaries, I think it's time for everyone to really try to be passionate about the cause and actually do something about it. So what I want to stress is if we keep waiting for the top-bottom approach by which we wait for institutional initiatives to change the Arabic digital media landscape, the impact could be longer term, but it would be much slower than if we actually, everyone decides to do something and to actually volunteer and to enrich the Arabic web by himself or by herself. So this is the main message I want to close with, and I think Taghreedat is the great testament for a couple of people, let's say thousands, not couple, but still, it's passion really creates the impact. So this is what I want to close with.
Is it on? Yeah. Qatar has one of the highest internet penetrations in the region, and I think that is really helping people here in terms of moving toward this open information society. There's so many people on Twitter and on Facebook now than there were 5 years ago when I first moved here. And I think that this, like Bill was saying, it's moving the media toward answering the questions and the news that are brought up through the internet. And I think that this internet is going to continue to shape Qatar's information society in the coming years. And I think we're going to see a whole different type of local media in the next decade. Thank you.
Okay, as I understood the question, I mean, I think issues over regime change and the Arab Spring and so forth have led to real concerns worldwide over whether the internet is too powerful almost. Even people in the United States and the UK were asking, is there a kill switch for the internet? Can we somehow turn this thing off? It only illustrates that we cannot be complacent about the internet. It is, or complacent about freedom of expression. We have to have a dialogue that comes to reasonable conclusions about how nations, communities worldwide, we can reconcile conflicting values and interests so that we protect freedom of expression to the greatest extent possible and not let it be completely undermined by laws on liability, on privacy, on copyright, and I could go on. But these need to be explicitly dealt with, and I think that's why I praise this conference for actually putting on the table one of the central issues, I think, in the future of the internet, which is how we address this challenge of nurturing, supporting, protecting freedom of expression, despite valid concerns over compromising other legitimate values and interests. This is probably the central question of the future of the internet.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank the panelists. And now we have the coffee break, so we continue this discussion too. Thank you very much for attendance.